This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's special guest is one of the greatest directors and choreographers the theater world has ever known. She's won 5 Tony Awards for her work in Crazy for You, Showboat, Contact, and The Producers, for which she won 2 Tony Awards for Best Direction and Best Choreography. She also directed and choreographed the movie version, The Producers, the Musical, which received 4 Golden Globe Award nominations. Some of her other most popular theatrical productions include Oklahoma, The Music Man, Bullets Over Broadway, Big, Steel Pier, Young Frankenstein, The Scottsboro Boys, Prince of Broadway, Big Fish, New York, New York, Picnic, Left on 10th, and believe me, I'm just scratching the surface. Her shows have been produced not only on Broadway, but in London's West End and in countless national tours. For 10 years, she choreographed Madison Square Garden's annual spectacular, A Christmas Carol. She directed and choreographed The Merry Widow for the Metropolitan Opera. For the New York City Ballet, she created Double Feature, a full-length ballet highlighting the music of Irving Berlin and Walter Donaldson, and she also created For the Love of Duke, featuring the music of Duke Ellington. She won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Classical Music Dance Program for the TV production of Contact, and she received an Emmy Award nomination for Liza Minnelli's TV special, Liza, live from Radio City Music Hall. And for her work in the feature film Center Stage, she received the American Choreography Award. And her latest Broadway musical is Smash, which opened in April and has been getting rave reviews. The show, which is inspired by the hit TV series of the same name, is a terrific musical comedy about all the backstage pandemonium as opening night approaches for a splashy new show about Marilyn Monroe called Bombshell. In addition to her 5 Tony Awards, our guest has received 11 more Tony Award nominations, and she's won a Helen Hayes Award, a Commonwealth Award, 2 Laurence Olivier Awards, 6 Drama Desk Awards, 13 Outer Critics Circle Awards, 2 Lucille Lortel Awards, 6 Fred Astaire Awards, and 3 Lifetime Achievement Awards, including the George Abbott Award and the Oscar Hammerstein Award. And in 2014, she was inducted into the Theater Hall of Fame. And I just have to mention that in 2001, our guest was named Woman of the Year by Glamour magazine. I'm delighted and deeply honored to welcome the incomparable Susan Stroman to our show. Susan, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Harvey. I am so thrilled to be here. So thrilled. Thank you very much.
I have to ask you, what goes through your mind when you hear all of those accomplishments and accolades?
Well, actually, no, that was quite the introduction. Now, it made me a little tired, actually, to be quite frank. But, you know, the thing is, it's so wonderful to get all these accolades, but I love working. I really love creating for the theater. I love the art of it all and the collaboration of it all. So, you know, that's what drives me. It like feeds my soul. And the accolades, of course, are just icing on the cake.
It's quite a big cake, and you're not done yet. You are first and foremost a storyteller, and everything you do as a choreographer advances the story. I know that you were heavily inspired by Jerome Robbins and George Balanchine, but you've said that your real heroes were your parents. How did they inspire you to become a storyteller through music and dance?
Oh, geez. Well, you just made me fill up a little bit there. Yes, well, my father was a wonderful piano player, and he could play any song in any key. You know, he had that kind of ear, and he also would play standards or rock and roll or old jazz songs or classical. Oh, he also played the guitar, but so that my house was filled with music all the time. And they would make it a big deal if a musical came on television. You know, we'd bring out the TV tray tables and we'd sit and we'd watch that musical. And the importance of how musicals can make you so happy. And so I grew up with it. So And my father was a big fish storyteller. To these days, I don't know if those stories were true or not, but it was that combination of the music and the storytelling that made me fall in love with musical theater and want to pursue it, want to be a part of it.
Your father gave you the same advice that my dad gave me, which was don't ever be afraid to ask for something. The worst that anybody can say is no. I'm just
Yes.
wondering, Susan, given your phenomenal success, has anyone ever said no to you?
Well, now that I think of it, well, I think a couple producers might have said no to me about some financial things, but as far as creation, no, I think I've been very lucky that I've been allowed to really be able to create and in a good way. And I've been very lucky that the teams I've been a part of have been very supportive on the artistic side.
You started out as a performer, but did you always know deep inside that you wanted to be a creator more than a performer?
Yes, I was that little girl who danced around the living room and her father playing the piano, creating dances and being part of creating a show. I very, at a very young age, would be the choreographer or the director of the little shows in Wilmington, Delaware. But I knew I couldn't come to New York and just take over. I had to come to New York and assess the situation. So I came as a song and dance scout because I could sing and dance. But it was always to be on the other side of the table, always to be part of creating.
You performed in the first national tour of Chicago, written by Kander and Ebb, and you collaborated with them on Flora the Red Menace, which was your first really big break as a choreographer. And you
Yes.
worked with them again in the 1991 off Broadway production, And the World Goes Round. You've described your time working with Kander and Ebb as a master class in how to create a show. What would you say was the most important thing that you learned from them?
Well, I think it was about collaboration, how to collaborate with a group of people in a room. Because, there is no other art form quite like the musical theater where you have set designer, lighting designer, now projection designer, costume designer, of course, your actors and all. But that kind of collaboration of Fred Ebb always said there's never a bad idea because someone could throw a bad idea on the table and someone else could pick it up and turn it into gold. So to make sure all egos are outside the door and that you just discuss the story of the play, the story of the musical. And that was really, really good advice. And sometimes I'll find myself in a group of creatives where they have not gotten that advice yet. So it's a little tricky. So I feel like Kander Neb, I was very lucky that they were the ones that I grew up with in this business because they really know how to collaborate.
I think that's fascinating because when I was doing my research for this interview, Susan, the word that kept coming up to describe you was collaborator. You're known for working as part of a team. You're not a lone wolf. So what do you look for in the people you surround yourself with?
Well, I think the people that I surround myself with, I want them to be the best at what they do, of course, but also I need that kind of give and take. I need to be able to sit with a set designer, allow him to show me what he's thinking, but then allow my input. And it's that combination of those artists coming together, either two artists or all the artists coming together. But I do that with actors too. I have to say, when I go into rehearsal, I have a big plan about what I want, the blocking, the choreography, but I don't always share that information with the actors. I want them to feel like they're creating, I want them to feel like they're very much a part of it. And I am inspired by them. I am inspired by actors. So it's working together. If they, head down the wrong path, at least I have a plan to help get them back, but it's always done with the thought of letting them feel like great creators and part of the project.
I think the key to the success in your collaborations is something you said a few moments ago, which is that people have to leave their egos at the door.
Yes. And that's very important because I've worked with very famous collaborators and I've been very lucky. When you think of somebody like Mel Brooks, he very much is a collaborator and very much is a team player. So when we are together, he listens to all the departments. But he comes from that collaboration of a writer's room of your show of shows. He's not like a lone wolf in a broom closet writing by himself. He is part of all that, of a writer's room. But he absolutely was so respectful to the entire group, because I was very lucky to do the producers with Mel and also Young Frankenstein with Mel, and big productions in not only on Broadway, but in London, and then tours. So we were together for a very long time.
He defines the word legend.
Yeah.
I mentioned And the World Goes Round, which I got to see in 1992. And I was so impressed with your choreography on roller skates for the number From the Rink. Did you know how to roller skate before that show?
No. I mean, I was not a great roller skater, but who was a good roller skater was Scott Ellis, our director. And so, he gave us all tips about how to really do it well. And then I certainly, choreographed it. But Scott gave us sort of the basics of how to roller skate, because I think the only person that had roller skated before was Karen Ziemba and Jimmy Walton. I think those two had roller skated, but we were all getting some tips from Scott Ellis.
The other thing about that show was the idea to do an international version of New York, New York with the spinning globe on the piano. Whose idea was that?
Well, I think that came out of just not wanting to do the number straight up, not doing the way it had been done by Liza, and trying to find a new way to do it. At that time, it was, well, the song is so popular. I was going to say at that time it was so popular then, but it's still, has gone to some other universe. Some songs go to some other universe, and they're in their own place there. But so the idea was, I had been to places in Europe, and all of a sudden you hear New York played in the San Marco Square in Venice or something, So it is played all over the world. So that idea came out, and the idea, well, what if they spun a globe and played a game and just pointed their finger anywhere, and were able to sing New York, New York in that language, meaning that the song has transcended all languages and all cultures, and it's sung everywhere. One in the world knows that song.
I loved it because as a Canadian, the concept of New York, New York being sung in all those languages reinforced for me the impact of American popular culture on the whole world.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what it was meant to do. It was meant to make that point.
I loved it. I'm interested in your process as a choreographer. When you listen to music, Susan, what are you visualizing in your head?
Well, that's interesting, because a lot of choreographers have a different process. And for me, ever since I was a kid, I would hear music and I would visualize it. And no matter what it is, if it's classical or a standard, I imagine hordes of people dancing through my head. And I can see it costumed, everything. Music is very visual to me. So when I'm choreographing, that's the first thing I work out. Well, the story is very important. So I make sure what the number has to achieve. You just can't do a number. It has to achieve something, whether two people meet each other and by the end of the number, they fall in love. Like, for example, Shall We Dance in Crazy Few? They meet each other and they're a little reticent. She is, of course. And then by the end, of course, they fall in love. So it's what the number has to do as a journey. So I also work with a dance arranger. So a lot of my choreography and every show that I do is supported by the music and the orchestration. So if everybody on stage kicks their leg, the whole orchestra kicks their leg. You know what I mean? So the music is supporting the visual at all times. And so, in fact, the steps are the very, very last thing I do. I work out the story and the music arrangement, and then I do the steps. So it's a very different process for me.
It's a fascinating process. For a very long time, the world of choreography was dominated by men, and you've been quoted as saying that successful women are more harshly critiqued than men are. Do you still believe that even today?
Well, sure. Especially, yes, we see it in politics all the time. And I think, yes, women still are, I feel like we had maybe, a year there where we were having some celebration of women, and now we're back to square one, it feels sometimes. But I do feel that women are criticized more harshly.
I don't know what it's going to take for people to realize that gender is absolutely irrelevant when it comes to talent and merit
Yes. Yeah.
and achievement. So before you start working on a show, you must do a lot of research.
Oh, I do. For whatever, if the show is in a geographical area of it and the time period, the decade, because that does inform you on what's happening in society at the time. Because a lot of times, if you're doing shows, you're either in the 20s or the 30s or the 40s or the 50s, trying to find out pinpointing what is happening in society. And people, for choreography, people, they dance very differently in the South than they do in the North, or they dance very differently in the West than the East. And it's making sure that you understand the history and understand what is going on at that time in that decade. And that will absolutely inform you choreographically and directorially.
That explains a lot about why your dancing is very contextual. There's a context.
Yes.
So when you're directing and choreographing a show, are there times when Susan, the director, is in conflict with Susan, the choreographer?
That hasn't happened yet, I must say, because the thing is, it's you want it to be a whole piece, so you want to never see where the director's work ends and the choreographer's work begins. It should feel, even if you are sharing the hats with somebody, you need to make it look like it was by one person in the end. And that's making sure that not only the director and choreographer, but set designer, costume designer, you have to make sure everybody's on the same page, that all of a sudden someone's gone off willy-nilly and doing another style or something, so it's making sure that everybody's telling the same story at all times.
You've said that you don't want to work with somebody who's nervous. You want to work with someone who's fearless. Is fearlessness something you can teach people?
I don't think fearlessness is something you can teach people, but I think it's something they can achieve at some point in their life. When I use a phrase like that, it's mostly at auditions. It's people coming in, being prepared, and the more prepared they are at an audition, the braver they're going to be. The more prepared they are, the more confidence they will have in themselves. If you're not prepared, if you haven't done your own homework, you're going to come in a bit nervous about the whole thing. And you just want somebody who is going to take that extra mile to do the work, to understand what they're auditioning for, be prepared. Because, you just want, also that you want people to be able to fall on their face if they want to try something and get back up again, not to fall on your face and never get back up again. You want them to be able to take chances, because that's how we create. You take chances as an artist with color, with clay. You want to take chances, and the more you know about yourself inside, the more prepared you are, the more chances you're going to take.
But it strikes me as you're talking that the process of auditioning potential cast members is a skill in and of itself, quite beyond what you do as a director and choreographer. This whole idea of using your own intuition and instincts and sizing people up and getting to understand if they have that quality, that's got to be an acquired skill.
Well, it is. You want to speak to the person too. You want to, and when you ask them their name or ask them, how they're doing today, everything good, you want them to be able to speak back to you and not be afraid or shy. And so I do go beyond it to try to make sure that the person I'm bringing into this room of artists will be part of it, will play with us, will take the chances. And sometimes you can feel that in an audition that either their ego's too big to want to play with you, or they're too afraid to play with you. And you just have to feel it.
Yeah, I can tell you're very intuitive. Now, you were nominated for an Emmy Award for choreographing Liza Minnelli's show from Radio City Music Hall, which in my opinion is the very best show Liza has ever done. But I want to take you back to April 23rd, 1991, which was opening night. I had the thrill of being there. And
At Liza's show.
yes.
Oh my God.
And after taking her bows, Liza brought you and Fred Ebb onto the stage. You were standing there in front of 6,000 screaming fans. Can you describe what you were feeling in that moment?
Well, yes, at the end of Liza's show, it was a beautiful show. I mean, she was incredible. She was in unbelievable shape, singing and dancing. And it was what was a highlight of my career, really. She was spectacular. She had 12 women backing her up and so gracious to those women. And then, of course, the big, beautiful orchestra on stage. It was a fantastic show. But at the end of it, Fred Ebb and I were backstage and she brought us out. I couldn't believe it. And so all of a sudden, Fred Ebb and I were out there, and Fred grabbed my hand and we went to take a bow. And while we were taking our bow, Fred said to me, remember this, it's not always like this. And, because it was 5,000 people screaming, going crazy. And I take those words to heart because it's not always like that. It's not always 5,000 people screaming. And it was a thrilling night. It was a thrilling night.
Yeah, I'm so happy that I got to be there that night. It was something I'll never forget. Now, of all the shows you've given us, I have to say that The Producers is probably the funniest.
The funniest,
In
yes.
fact, you've described it as a comedy musical rather than a musical comedy. And that show came along when there really wasn't a lot of comedy happening on stage. We were all going to Phantom and Les Mis and Miss Saigon. How important do you think the success of a show depends on what else is happening in the theater world and maybe even generally the real world?
Yes, I do think. Well, I think what is happening in the world today can affect the success of a show. Yesterday I saw the wonderful play Good Night and Good Luck, and oh my, it really not comments, just is, and relates to what is happening in today's world. Of course, that was the McCarthy era, and then we have today's world. So there was that play that it was spectacular and very emotional for the whole company and the audience. And I think it had to do, not only was it a very good play, but it has to do with what is happening in the world. So I do think current events do affect the show. Certainly, I do feel that Broadway is just coming back right now. Although we came back after the pandemic, I think we were out of work more than anybody. But when Broadway finally came back, we weren't, the audiences weren't there, the tourists weren't there, people were still frightened. And it's only taken until now for that kind of tourists are back, the kind of joy is back, the kind of happy busyness of the Broadway area is back. So that's a very good example of why, because shows came and went like that when we all opened up again. They didn't last. So yes, I absolutely believe everything taps in. And when The Producers was being done, of course, we did have shows like Miss Saigon and Les Mis, and I think people just wanted to laugh. People couldn't believe what it was like to have a real musical that was filled with comedy from every department.
It was a magnificent, magnificent show. Now, a lot of people may not know, Susan, that you and your beloved husband, Mike, were going to direct and choreograph The Producers, but Mike tragically passed away on December 2nd, 1999, which must have been beyond devastating. And then a few months later, Mel Brooks asked you to do both jobs. How much convincing did you need to say yes?
Yes, it was a terrible time, for me. Even I'm filling up you talking about it after all these years. But we had, Mike and I had done Crazy Few together as director choreographer. We had done A Christmas Carol together as director choreographer, and Mel had come to see us together. And so we had just started working on it, but working on because when Mel came, he only came with his film script. Now it had to be turned into a musical piece, something for the theater, which is a different animal. And what is great about Mel is that he came to people who know how to do this, and had a great collaborative spirit about it, about how to make this film script into a musical. So we started working on the structure of it. And then sadly, so Mike got leukemia, so everything stopped. And after Mike died, I was in terrible shape. It was one of those things where you could feel the grief under your skin, like it might bubble out or something. It was terrible. And I got a call saying Mel and Tom Meehan, and also a wonderful writer, were at the door. And so they came in, and I was sitting in the living room, and I thought for sure they were there just to offer their condolences and happy to see them. And then Mel said, I want you to direct and choreograph the producers. And I didn't answer because I was shocked. And he said, you can do it. I created a show called Contact up at Lincoln Center that Mel absolutely loved. I had directed The Music Man, the big revival, and created a ballet called Double Feature. So Mel knew that I, could direct, and already had worked on the structure of it, with all of them. So he just said, I know that you could do this. And he said, and I will be there. And he said, I know it's going to be difficult, but said, you'll cry in the morning and you'll cry at night. But when you're with me all day, I will make you laugh. And when he said that, how could I say no?
I think that's what Mike would have wanted you to do.
Yeah, he would have. I know he would have.
Well, what's amazing is that it started as a movie, then you make this into the phenomenally successful stage production, then you go and direct the movie. Was it really challenging to turn the show into a movie when it was a stage production?
It was challenging because Mel loved the stage production so much too. He just really wanted the stage production up on the screen, So it was challenging. It was, just the kind of eccentric characters up on the screen, just trying to somehow in the theater they're believable yet eccentric, but on the film is so close up, you went, oh my gosh, so, but it was great to work with, and we had Nathan and Matthew in there, and just a great music department and great set. We'd shot over at Steiner Studios, and it was a thrill to then take it onto the big screen, a real thrill.
Well, I'm really glad I get to interview you to tell you something. I would imagine that you must have had some apprehension about how the Springtime for Hitler number would be received by the audience. But I want to tell you, I'm Jewish. My mother is a Holocaust survivor, and I took her to see the stage show, and she loved it. But did you ever have an audience member react badly to the number?
Yes. Well, yeah, you know what? Mel was very good about writing into the musical that Max Bialystock will always say, we're looking for the worst show ever written. We're looking for the worst show ever written, so the audience would know when we finally found it, that's what our goal was, so they wouldn't just not be paying attention. And even when we rehearsed down at 42nd Street, where they have automatic shades that come down. Every time we got to Springtime for Hitler in rehearsal, stage management would bring the shades down because I was so afraid that someone living across the street would look into the windows and think we were some sort of, Aryan group or something looking in. So it was like part of all the run-throughs that the shades would come in for Springtime and then go out again. Because I didn't want any trouble. Anyway, we went out of town, and it went great and no problem. And we were doing Springtime for Hitler, and there was no trouble. And I thought, okay, everybody's listening to the story, listening to the plot. This is very good. Then when we got into New York and we were in previews, still we were doing pretty good. And then halfway into previews, they were doing the show, it was going well. And Gary Beach, who was Hitler, sat on the edge of the stage. And this older gentleman was sitting like in the front row. And all of a sudden he looked up, and I think he was enjoying the show very much. And he looked up and he saw Hitler sitting right in front of him on the stage. And he got up, stood up, and worked his way through the audience, cursing and screaming, saying, this is terrible. How could you do this? And he was making a huge scene. And I was in the back thinking, okay, this is what I was worried about. This is what I was worried about. And he kept going and cursing, and he'd come up the aisle and he sees Mel Brooks sitting on the edge of the aisle. And he goes up to Mel and he goes, how could you do this? I was in World War II. And Mel stood up, and I think Mel is going to be quite kind to the older gentleman and help him out or something. He goes, you were in World War II. I was in World War II, and I didn't see you there. And then they started fighting in the aisle. And so anyway, we have a general manager. She came, and very strong general manager. She came and grabbed the two of them and dragged them out and then threw them out onto 44th Street, out onto the street, because the audience, we all were like freaked out about the audience, And so there they were in the street. And then I went back out to see what was happening. And, finally at the end, Mel like shook hands with the guy, and the guy went around, and then Mel turned to me and he went to get back in and couldn't get back in. He couldn't get back in. So now Mel Brooks was like knocking on the glass on the door like that, So I went and let Mel Brooks back into his own show. But it was a wild scene. And then it never happened again. It only happened that one time. It never happened again.
Okay, so if it only happened once, I think you can safely say that people got what you were trying to get at. Now,
yes.
In 2023, you directed and choreographed another show based on a movie, New York, New York, which closed after 143 performances, if you include previews. Why do you think the show wasn't more successful?
Oh, I love that show. For all of us, we were quite heartbroken about that. It was the first show back from the pandemic. It was a big musical. I think the thinking was, this will bring everybody back. This is about New York. And it had references to, it took place right after the war where people were hopeful. So you could relate it to what was happening, that we are hopeful we're going to get through this. And the show was big. It was, the weekly cost of it was over $1 million a week. And we just didn't have the tourists back. They weren't back. And so it was a very, very heartbreaking time for us. It really was. And hopefully there'll be a tour someday. We're hoping for that.
I hope so. I thought when I saw it that it's hard to make a musical, a theatrical production about a musical movie. The Producers was not a musical, the original.
That's true.
And here you've got Liza Minnelli doing a movie musical. And I remember people sitting around me in the audience saying, yeah, but she's not Liza. Like, all we can think about is Liza.
No.
That was a big challenge you took on.
Yes, I know. Because there's nobody like Liza. I know that is very tricky. So it's finding, those. I think maybe that's why George Clooney is starring in his own movie over the show, because no one was as good as George Clooney.
Yeah, he doesn't have to compete with anybody.
Yeah.
As you know, we have a very dear mutual friend, Julian Schlossberg. He produced your show, Bullets Over Broadway. What makes him such a special producer?
Julian is a very special producer because he plays both ends. He is very much there for the artist and giving the artists what they need, and is very kind to them and supportive to the artists, all of them who are involved in making the show. And then he's very much there for his investors and for his fellow producers. So because I have worked with producers that can only do that, and they can't be bothered with the artists really. But Julian knows that supporting the artists too, even, I'm not even talking financially, even in a kind word, can make their work stronger. And so I'll always think he's one of the best producers I've ever worked for.
I think he's one of the best human beings around. I've always wanted to ask someone who worked with him, what was it like? And I think you nailed it. So let me ask you about Smash, Susan. Congratulations on the rave reviews. Everyone's saying it's Broadway's biggest hit of the year. You must be thrilled.
I am thrilled because when I got the call for it, I had seen the TV show, which was like 12 years ago. And I loved it. It was more of a soap opera though. But when I got the call, I was told it was going to be a comedy. And of course, that's what I love to do. So I was very, very excited about it.
So, for people like me who fell in love with the TV series, what can we expect to see in this show?
Well, I think you have the familiar characters, of course, but they're all a little different, but it's still a bit familiar. But it's a pure musical comedy in the sense of these characters come together and to create a musical. And they're all those sort of eccentric people that you see, creating a show for real. It has a very meta quality because as we are a group of people trying to put on a musical, it was about a group of people trying to put on a musical. And everything that happens in Smash has actually happened to me. so we all can relate to it. We all can absolutely relate to it. And the other thing is, usually in the musical theater, you're in a more fantastical time frame, another time period. But this is contemporary times. But then you have the added plus about this musical that they're putting on is a musical called Bombshell about Marilyn Monroe. So then you have the wonderful costumes and visuals of Marilyn Monroe and her time, and then you come back to contemporary times, and the creative team is disagreeing or agreeing about what it takes to put on a musical. So I think in a way it shows an audience, but it does not unlike how producers, you were told, the audience was told how to become a producer through the eyes of Leo Bloom. And for Smash, the audience is shown all the elements that it takes to put on a musical.
Well, until Smash came along, I think the most famous Broadway shows about the backstage world were 42nd Street and A Chorus Line. And of course, the producers, as you said, that show taught us how to become producers. Yeah. And Smash celebrates not only the memory of Marilyn Monroe, but also the world of musical theater in general. And yes. One of the producers is Steven Spielberg. How involved has he been in the production?
Well, it was Steven Spielberg's idea initially to do the TV show. And he was one of the producers on the TV show, but it was his idea to do a TV show about putting on a musical. And so after the show ended, now 12 years later, he said again, wouldn't it be nice to actually make it a real musical? And then it was trying to find the right writing team to do that. And the combination of Rick Ellis and Bob Martin, who are both known for writing comedies, Rick, Jersey Boys and Peter and the Starcatcher, and Bob Martin did The Prom and The Drowsy Chaperone. They both have very good musical theater chops in their writing. So it was once they had them, they thought, okay, let's do it. And it's three producers. It's Steven Spielberg and Bob Greenblatt and Neil Marin, and they're fantastic and have been unbelievably respectful. And it's been a real joy to work with them. And Steven is shooting a movie right now, so he wasn't there on opening. He came the weekend before to see it, and he's been very supportive.
I have a feeling Steven Spielberg is going to want to turn Smash the musical into a movie.
Wouldn't that be nice? That would be fantastic. That'd be wonderful.
When you first met Hal Prince, Susan, he gave you some advice. He said the day after you open a show, you should have a meeting for the next show. So have you followed that advice?
I have followed that advice every day. Absolutely. And after Smash opened, I'm doing a one-night concert of a show in London at the Drury Lane, a one-night concert on July 27th called Little Dancer, which I did here out of town in Seattle and the Kennedy Center. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. But we're going to do a concert version. And so the next day, right after Smash, we had big Zoom calls and big meetings for it, getting it all sorted for July.
Hal Prince, but I think that's good
advice. Yes, Hal Prince. It's really good advice, because no matter what happens, if you love what you do, you got to go forward.
Well, when people think of you, I think that they think of music and dancing and singing, but you've also directed non-musical plays like Photograph 51 and Left on 10th. Would you like to direct more plays?
Yes, I love directing plays. I think, at this point in my life too, I feel like I've lived through every emotion one could live through. And I feel like I'm there to help the actors more so than I've ever been before emotionally. And so I did Coleman Domingo's play Dot off Broadway, and I loved being a part of that. And Delia Ephron's Left on 10th, of course. And POTUS was a big play on Broadway, but that was a pure comedy. But of course, it commented on women in society, and then the erosion of women's rights, by the way. But all these plays, you're able to tap into probably something that's more current and more profound in a way. And so absolutely, I would love to do more plays.
You've had such a phenomenal life. Do you think you'll ever take the time to sit down and write a memoir or even a play about you?
I do have some journaling for the possibility for a memoir someday. And I'm not ready to do that sit down yet, but I think for sure I'm going to have it.
Okay, when that book comes out, I'm begging you to come back on our show.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely, Harvey. Wonderful.
I've got to tell you, it's been such an honor meeting you and getting this chance to ask you about your career. I know how incredibly busy you are. Thank you for taking the time to appear on our show.
Thank you, Harvey. It was a wonderful interview. Thank you for doing your preparation. Thank you for doing your research. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. I'm a big fan. Our guest has been the legendary Susan Stroman. For more information about Miss Stroman, please visit her official website, susanstroman.com. And for more information about Smash and to get tickets, please go to smashbroadway.com. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time. Thank you to my producers, Steve Silver, my managers, Rick Marcelli and Robin Bragg Marcelli of the Marcelli Company in Hollywood, my director of programming, Robert Monaghan, my editor, Isaiah Sheralampidis, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.